Joe Hopkins here, and my name is Joe Hopkins. It says it on the channel, and you're watching me, because I'm freaking awesome, man. I think, I don't know, something like that, or what the hell ever, dude. All right, you've tuned in for the top 10 greatest guitarists of all time. Why am I doing this video? Well, I did a teaser on a short because I just thought, hey, what would make a good short real quick? And I just asked the question, and that kind of, you know, condemns me to doing a video about the top 10 guitarists. I think I've done something like this before, but I'm doing it again. No, I did top 10 underrated guitarists, I think. Anyway, top 10 greatest guitarists of all time, according to me, because I'm a goddamn expert. And if I look like I haven't changed my clothes since my last video, it's because I haven't. I unboxed a guitar just, you know, a little bit ago. And then decided to drink beer and play my new guitar. And then shoot a video. So I got a list. If you're here looking for fancy editing and all that kind of stuff, this ain't the channel for that. Because I'm drinking and I ain't editing. So, I'm just going to give you my list. It's a controversial list. Y'all might hate it. But I'm not looking for the most influential guitarists or my favorite guitarists. My favorite guitarists, right? Probably my favorites. I love, some of them are on this list, but like Tony Iommi's one of my favorites, and he's not on this list because I don't think he's one of the greatest. He's just my favorite, one of my favorites. But some of my other favorites are on here, like, we'll start with number 10. Bottom of the list, Eddie Van Halen. Why is Eddie at the bottom of the list? One of my favorite guitarists of all time. Why is he at the bottom? Why would I start out with Eddie? He's like great, right? Well, his riffs are really catchy. The dude was incredibly innovative. But I don't know about greatest as in all-around ability to play. The guy's amazing, absolutely amazing. But keep in mind, you know, it just goes up from here, in my opinion. Eddie Van Halen was an amazing rock guitarist, but he was an amazing rock guitarist. I don't know, man. I think there are some more proficient players out there who could do a lot of other things that Eddie didn't. I imagine he could have. He could have, but he didn't show it off. He didn't. He just did rock. He did it almost better than anybody else. But the dude, yeah, he was absolutely amazing. But I'm starting out the list, number 10. You know, for some reason, I thought he'd be higher too. Honestly, I made a list of greatest guitarists, and I just picked the top 10 in my opinion, and he ended up at 10. I don't know. I'm sure some people will get mad at me and say, you were drunk when you made this list. Not drunk, just buzzed. Solidly buzzed. So let's move on. Number 9, Jimmy Page. And why would I put Jimmy Page above Eddie Van Halen? Well, one, I mean, granted, Jimmy Page is probably my favorite guitarist of all time. Just for what he did. But Jimmy Page did a lot of stuff. Not just rock guitar. He could play country, he could play folk, he could play a lot of other stuff, and he could do it incredibly proficiently. You know, the guy was a great studio musician before he joined the Yardbirds. As far as sheer ability, I think Jimmy Page is above Eddie Van Halen. I'm sorry, just that's what I think. But these guys are at 10 and 9. Who could I possibly put above this? You know what I mean? Starting out with some great ones, but I'd put it number 8, and be mad if you want, Neil Schon. And I say that because I think Neil Schon people don't recognize how good he is. You know? How good. How good is Neil Schon? Really give some of that stuff a listen. The stuff he did with Journey, but the stuff he did with Santana. Neil Schon is an amazing musician who could do stuff that you didn't realize it was Neil Schon, you know? That's why Eddie's at 10. Everything Eddie Van Halen did, you knew it was Eddie Van Halen. He had one sound, It was amazing, but he had one sound. And Jimmy Page didn't, and Neil Schon definitely didn't. My God, that dude could do anything, and he could do it all proficiently. And that's the thing about being the greatest guitarist. How proficient are you? How good are you at doing literally anything, right? Neil Schon, the dude had it all. He could play anything. And I'd put it number 7, Jimi Hendrix. Definitely one of my favorite guitarists of all time. But more than that, Jimi Hendrix was also unbelievably proficient and understood music in some very interesting ways. And that's what really puts him head and shoulders above so many other guitarists, is the fact that he just seemed to bleed music. I mean, good Lord, the guy didn't even seem to really think about what he was doing, yet did it amazingly. And you listen to a lot of the stuff he did that didn't make his main albums, right? I've listened to a lot of his, off the beaten track stuff, and the dude could play anything incredibly well. It's like he just understood the guitar, knew how he wanted it to sound, and could just make it happen, It really blows my mind how he was able to do that. And that really, it puts him up there. He definitely wasn't a one-trick pony, although primarily he played blues rock. He could do other things, Above Jimi Hendrix, number 6, I'd put Steve Vai, right? Mostly because Steve Vai has impressed the crap out of me. I mean, for God's sake, he played with Frank Zappa and was better than Frank Zappa, But more than that, he's done so much and played with so many other people and just melds seamlessly into anything he's doing, which always amazes me when somebody can do that. That's a lot harder than people realize, to just seamlessly meld into whatever groove is going on, even if it's not the thing you're recognized as, to just be able to jump in and do it. And he's been able to do that, like with Frank Zappa, which is hard. Playing anything Frank Zappa writes is difficult. And then going straight into, what was it? The David Lee Roth band. He played with them. And just to meld seamlessly into that, And everything he's done since, especially like some of the stuff he's done lately, just blows my mind. All right, number 5. I'm going to go to number 5 now. Steve Lukather. We got another Steve. Steve Lukather. Why Steve Lukather? Well, because the guy's one of the greatest studio musicians of all time. Plus, the stuff he did, he's just done some amazing stuff over the years. And he's played with so many people. And he's played so many different styles of music. And half the time when you hear something he's on, you don't know it's him. Because, once again, he doesn't have one sound. He's not like... When Eric Clapton plays something, and when Eric Clapton's one that came up a lot when I asked who the greatest guitarists are, you always know it's Eric Clapton. You know immediately, that's Eric Clapton. Steve Lukather, you don't always know it's Steve Lukather. You usually don't. You just think, man, that's amazing. Who is that guy? And you look it up, it's like, oh, it's Steve Lukather. That always impresses me. It always impresses me when somebody is proficient enough to be able to do things so differently from one thing to the next that you don't instantly recognize them. And a lot of our favorite guitarists have that instantly recognizable voice, like Jimi Hendrix or, Eric Clapton or, Jimi Hendrix. I can't say Jimmy Page. He did so many different things that you don't recognize it from one to the next. He really had several voices he could play, but so many of them from the first note who that is. Steve Lukather, you don't. But I hope you guys like the list so far. You probably don't. You're probably mad at me. But once again, greatest guitarists, not favorite guitarists, right? Let's go to number 4. Because it's not just rock. It's not just rock here. Chet Atkins. Now, anybody that hasn't heard Chet Atkins stuff, because I know, that's older stuff, and some of y'all might not be that familiar with him. Listen to some of Chet Atkins stuff, man, and not just the stuff he released on albums and whatnot. The dude was an amazing guitarist and could play just about anything. He could play folk, he could play jazz, he could play classical, he could play country, he could play rock. He could do it all, and he could do it all amazingly well. My dad had an album, it was by Chet Atkins, it was called My Favorite Guitars, and each track had he featured a different guitar on it. And he played a little bit of everything on that album, and he did it all so well. And when you watch him play it, he makes it look so easy. I mean, so easy that, man, it's like, yeah, Eddie Van Halen makes stuff look easy. Jimi Hendrix makes stuff look easy, but they make it look easy in a way that's easy for them. Chet Atkins makes it look easy in a way that tricks you into thinking that maybe you could do it yourself. Like, it doesn't look that hard. And then you go to try it. And it's like, damn, that is like the most difficult thing I've ever tried to play in my life. How does he do it like that? To take something that difficult, like a lot of the stuff he played, and make it look like you could do it. Yeah. Number 3, and here is into one of the greatest innovators of all time, Les Paul. If you're not familiar with Les Paul, look him up. He played with his wife, Mary Ford, and there are some videos on YouTube of them. What amazes me about Les Paul is how just casual his performances are, where he doesn't look like he's working at it at all. And the fact that, you got to remember, this is like the 40s and 50s. He was incorporating things in his guitar playing that were revolutionary at the time. Like with Jimi Hendrix, right? Jimi Hendrix did stuff that would become normal for rock guitar, but wasn't, right? Les Paul is primarily known for like country music, but he wasn't just a country musician. He was a great jazz guitarist, and he played a lot of rock stuff too. And besides putting his name on the first and greatest signature model guitar of all time, the Gibson Les Paul, he invented a lot of stuff having to do with music and the guitar. Not just the solid body electric guitar, which he invented, but multi-track recording, and other amazing things. He was unbelievably proficient and could play anything with ease. And he just amazes me. Everything I see of Les Paul's is amazing. Every time I see a video clip of him, it blows my mind because it's just easy and seamless, and he could do anything, especially for the time. That's the other thing. If you're watching it, you're like, well, he doesn't do this. He doesn't do shredding. He doesn't do tapping. He doesn't. It was the 50s, nobody even considered that stuff back then. But if Les Paul, I believe, had been born in the 90s or 2000s, he would be the greatest shred guitarist of all time. You know what I mean? All right, so who would I put above Les Paul? Guthrie Govan, who I think for honestly not ever having been in a super popular band, is one of the greatest guitarists who ever lived. Now keep in mind, I'm not putting classical music on this list, or you'd have 8 of them would be classical guitarists, because good Lord, look up some of that stuff, right? Andre Segovia was amazing, and there are a lot of others, but we're not doing classical. Guthrie Govan can do classical and has done classical, but the stuff he does, holy crap, the dude can literally just jump into anything at any time and do everything amazingly. And I just, something has to be said for a guy that is known among guitarists as one of the greatest guitarists of all time without having been in a really popular band, without having, he's not on MTV, he's not on the radio, but we all know who he is, right? If you're a guitarist, you probably have heard his name at least. Guthrie Govan is amazing. Like, honestly, next world stuff there, and most people would, who are in the know, would put him at the top of the list, right? Most serious guitar guys put Guthrie at the top of their list, but I have him at number 2. And the reason why is my number 1. And I have to say, honestly, it's another Yardbird, Jeff Beck. And why would I put Jeff Beck at number 1? The late, great Jeff Beck, right? Oh, my God. What can I say? The fact that Jeff Beck did the psychedelic blues stuff with the Yardbirds and then did everything else. Literally everything else. What amazed me is one of the first albums I bought was Blaze of Glory by John Bon Jovi. John Bon Jovi's solo album, right? And I'm looking at the credits, and Jeff Beck played lead guitar on a lot of those songs. Played, you know, not just lead guitar, but rhythm and a lot of the lead stuff. And I mean, the fact that he was a 60s rocker, you know, one of the Yardbirds. We know the 3 Yardbirds guitarists, right? Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and Jimmy Page. But I don't see Eric Clapton or Jimmy Page doing hair metal. And Jeff Beck did, and he did it incredibly well. And Jeff Beck did, you know, he did Spanish guitar incredibly well, and he did some country stuff incredibly well. And Jeff Beck blows my mind because he literally just did everything. And none of his stuff was like, after the Yardbirds, Jeff Beck was incredibly well known among musicians and in the rock community. And he did a lot of stuff with a lot of people, but he wasn't one of those headline names that's like known by the general public. But he just played with everybody and did everything. And that's what makes a greatest guitarist. That's what I have on this list. The guys that could do so much more than just the thing that they're, quote, known for. And I put Jeff Beck at the top of that. Now, I did have some other considerations. Honestly, I did consider, you know, for honorable mentions, Buckethead. Just because the dude, for what he does, is amazing. And puts out so much music, so much of it. And it's all really good. I don't know how anybody produces that much music in a lifetime. It's shocking. Paul Gilbert is another one I seriously considered for this list. He's just not better than those other guys. Although he is amazing. And he smiles all the time. He seems like such a nice guy, right? And if Paul Gilbert ever saw this list, I don't think he would fault me for leaving him off it because of who's on it. You know? We're looking at the top 10. And, you know, that's a small sliver of guitarists. You know, of course I considered Eric Clapton. I just don't consider Eric Clapton to be as innovative as a lot of these other guys or as good at multiple things. You know, I don't think Eric Clapton could just go in a studio and do anything. I've heard some of his attempts, and Eric Clapton does Eric Clapton incredibly well, right? So there were others I thought of too, but that's my top 10. Yeah, with Jeff Beck topping the list. My dad was surprised too when I told him Jeff Beck, I think, is maybe the greatest guitarist, greatest rock popular music guitarist of all time. And it's just because he does everything so well. Same thing with Guthrie Govan and a lot of the others. If you can do everything that well, you can just go in a studio, listen to part of a track and go, okay, I got it, and then do something amazing. That always blows my mind. Maybe it's because I can't do it, you know? I can do a lot of stuff, and I've played a lot of different types of music, but yeah, those dudes really take the cake. And maybe that's also why I consider the greatest to be people that can do so many different things, because I've had to learn so many different things. I haven't been able to afford to just have one sound, but to be able to do it at that level. You know what I mean? That always blows my mind. I always got to kind of fiddle around with something and work up to it, and then I can do it. But and I imagine a lot of the other people on that list could do that stuff if you gave them a chance. But I'm talking about the people that I've heard them shoot their shot and they nailed it. every time, no matter what. So anyway, that's my list. And in the comments, y'all are going to tell me I'm wrong. So just tell me I'm wrong. Tell me who I left off, and tell me who should have been above who else. You know what I mean? But I think we can all agree Guthrie Govan. Yeah, man. I have him at number 2. Maybe you think he deserves number 1. If you don't know who I'm talking about, or you're not so sure about it, look him up on YouTube. You'll get why he's up there, right? Why is he above Eddie? Why is he above Jimmy? Look him up, dude. You'll see. You'll see why. Look up some of Jeff Beck's stuff, and not just his most popular songs. You know, and you'll get it. Anyway, that's my list of the top 10 greatest guitarists of all time. So, in a minute here, there's an end screen. There's going to be some playlists. Check out my instrument reviews, my songs, and check out my album. I have an album out. Tell me if I'm one of the greatest guitarists of all time. It's in the description there. There's links to where you can stream it, or just look up Joe Hopkins, I Didn't Get a Memory. That's the name of the album. There are multiple Joe Hopkinses out there, but there's only one album called I Didn't Get a Memory, and it's mine. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. All right. I love you guys. Peace out, baby. Bye-bye.